So hello, welcome back to Signature Customs, or welcome to Signature Customs if you're new. My name's John, and we've had lots of new subscribers this week, so hopefully we're doing something right. And this week we're going to be working on the Rolls Royce Aero Special, so I hope you enjoy it. We actually get to build something this week. So here we go again. At the end of the last episode, we had a lovely Ranger 770 aero engine sat in its little crate, and we had a chassis. The chassis had been cleaned and prepped and a little bit of work done, but this week we're going to make some mounts, or at least we're going to make the front mounts. So general plan, two pieces, 180 by 250 I think, and we've got to mount them on the underside of here. I want to straddle the mount, so we've got some support, so on the underside of here. Now, there is a slight curve, so we've got to find that curve. More importantly, we've got to make sure they're in the same place. So, having had a bit of a measure up, there are a couple of holes that are actually uniform. Most of them aren't, although they look it, including this one here. Hang on. Okay, actually goes out that way. Push that out. There we go. So this is a bolt here. This one lines up exactly with this one here. So I've got exact lengths. From there I can do measurements. So we'll measure out where we want it, then we can work out the curvature and make that top piece. First things first, I've cleaned that up, taken that out as you've just seen. I'm just going to put some blue cam dye across there and across the other side. Engineer's blue, I think we used to call this at school in metalwork, or craft design and technology as it became known, which I actually got a D in, I think, at GCSE level, which is quite amusing really. Yeah, I think I actually got a D in craft design and technology. They didn't appreciate me wanting to build a bike that went on water. But there we go. Anyway, so we'll let that dry. Once we've got that, we can take a square off it and go from there. I might have to remove the shock, although I don't really want to. Just see if I can get a right angle on there and get that across. Once we've got that, we can then measure backwards, and the world is our oyster, so to speak. The pursuit of accuracy got the better of me, so I took the shock off. Incredibly complicated mount. Oh, this car is just amazing in terms of how complicated it is really. So I've marked up the very front leading edge of the holes on the front, and then I've just marked up the blue a bit further back, just so that we can see where we're going to start and finish. Simple as that. Not exactly genius, this is it. There we go. Okay, so what I've done is I've drawn a line between this point here and this point here, which is 50 centimeters, half a meter, 500 mil, whichever way you work. And I've got a straight line across there. As you can see, this is the curvature of the chassis, which just happens to be right where I want it to be. It's the only curve in the chassis typically. So I need to transfer that to the metal that we're going to use to make the mounts. So simple, I'm just gonna mark it with engineer's blue, turn it upside down, scribe it, clamp it on and scribe it. I've measured the size of that from there to here, so we can sit it on at the correct angle, and then basically it's just a case of cutting it out, and then it should, once it's flipped over, should go straight into the corresponding opposite sides. Clamped on, so all we've got to do is run our scribe, easier said than done, down here to get it marked. Try again. Okay. So now we're left with that little edge, which now needs to come off. So we can get that off on the bandsaw, I suppose. They use it as a bandsaw, the old hacksaw. So there's three of the components laid out here. The foot that goes inside the bottom, and then the top section. Top section will run that entire length as we had, and then there'll be another one there, which I'll do in a minute. Once both sides were cut out, I'll clamp them into place, and then I could get them tacked up, ready to be welded. Well, after a bit of a weld up with the brackets on, I've used the original Rolls Royce bolts and mounted them underneath. If you can just about see those, not a very good light, but yeah, we'll get a better picture of those coming up. You'll notice just how much that frame's got surface rust on it already, and I've sort of given up trying to fight that one. So anyway, that goes there. There will be a gusset in there. There will be some more bolts in there. I think we'll put 2 bolts on each side piece and then a gusset. And then the next move really is to work out how to get those things to work with those things. First job of the day done. Engine unbolted from cradle and suspended. Cradle now free and able to be removed, so the next job is to get the cradle off. It's just literally just tab welded in. Obviously it sits over the edge of the frame, so it isn't really too much of an issue, so we'll get that cut off. So front cradle's cut off, and this is where my complete lack of ability to draw really sort of comes to itself. I'm not able to draw. I can't draw a straight line with a rule, if I'm totally honest. So being able to plan this out in terms of drawing it is very difficult for me. So it is a little bit wing it as I go. But the premise is to try and get these little tabs inside here where they were originally, move the engine slightly forward from where it was, but then incorporate some of these mounts that I made and then prettify it as well as give it some strength. That hopefully will make sense by the time we get there. Rear one's out, front one's out. I haven't looked to see whether these are actually identical, but I'm going to clean these up now. I'm interested in this. This certainly looks to be brazed, so I'd just like to know how that's put in and how much effort went into that before I obviously decide to use those as a permanent. So I've cleaned up these, the front two. They are perfect copies of each other, so I'm going to stick with it going the way it was, which is the captive nuts on the back piece rather than the front, and that's just for access really as much as anything else. Now we're going to work out their position. So I think the best way to do that is as follows. I'm basically going to take a square across here, so we know that these bolts are in the same place on both sides, and taking that into account, I've spun these round so these are perfectly level with my rule running across, which allows me to scribe a mark going across there, which gives those absolutely perfectly level going across the chassis. That will then in effect give us the position of the back of the mount. I can then cut this away. I can put a little detail in here of some description, I'm quite sure, just to make it look a little bit nicer. Really boring, isn't it? So yeah, 2 lines scribed. That gives us our back level. So my thought processes and my plan is that I need to find out what this gap here is, which is basically the width of the mounts. I'm going to check they're all the same. Whatever the width of the mounts is, basically then we have to get this width here because we need these two to go on the outside. So this governs what the width is here and therefore where that sits. So next job is to measure the engine mounts, which are I've got a strange vernier that has millimeters on it, but also has sort of tenths of an inch rather than 1/16 of an inch or 30 seconds, which is a bit of a pain in the ass. I'm going to check all of them just to make sure they are all the same. Obviously a mill either side doesn't make too many odds, but let's try and get it as accurate as we can. Quick measure, they're all the same, which is at least a godsend. Looks to be, if we can focus, aha, there we go. Looks to be about 67 mil. I'm actually going to run it against the steel rule just to see how accurate that is. But 67 mil seems to be about right. And if I compare that with the old-fashioned steel rule, which is there, so we start from 0 there. We are indeed at 67. So 67 mil is the kiddie. Having got my verniers marked at 67, I think the best thing to do is just mark a couple off at 67 and go from there with that. And then basically we'll have our mount surfaces front and right there. So I'm on both. I've used my verniers, just sat right on the inside edge and just scratched a point over here to get the exact point of 67 mil. Sure, you've already worked this one out because it's not rocket science, is it? So these are our two mounting faces. Our engine mounts will basically sit on those once the back end is removed. We need to get them centrally mounted and we've got the right distance between them. I'm going to do some shaping in here, I think, and I'm going to do some shaping here because there's no point having this mount going all the way over here unless we use it for something. So let's do something like that, I think, just that sort of shape. We'll work that out in a bit and see what that looks like. So in terms of mounting this, I thought about putting just the rule down there and making a scribe or whatever. However, my OCD will kick in because this is where the curvature is. So at the point we've got the curvature there, I didn't want to have the curvature here, sorry. I didn't want to have a straight line or an angle or whatever. So what I've done is I've set the verniers to the width of the rule, and then I'm going to run it down this edge just to get the same on both sides, so it all matches. And voila, we have a line that matches the chassis, which is exactly what we want. So now we just need to radius this, radius this, radius this. A little bit of cutting later, I've just put those radiuses in here, here and here. Obviously they need finishing off. So the next thing is to get this cross piece mounted. So we need the mount centrally. So that's the next job, is to work out those centrally mounted. In the first place, I'm just going to use a set of calipers and just go from that point there to that point there, which will give us pretty much, I'm going to say exact. I'll then go from there to there, and obviously we can work out the height. By my reckoning, we're about there. If I run that in there, we've just got a couple of teeth. We can just pull it on the teeth. Same goes on this side. We can now just put it on the teeth, pretty much there. So it's pretty much bob on. I'm happy enough with that. It's just the height we've got to check now, and then I think we're okay. I'm just going to go from there and see what the height's like, and then probably have to start again. Right, I've got these in position. These are exactly on the calipers now, and they're also 53 mil from the center of the hole to the base plate. I've sort of cleaned just that area up there. I'm just going to tack these together now. So yeah, just a quick tack, just so that it holds it in one place. So I've just done a quick 1.5 on each side, just really to hold it in place. I mean, it's not much more than a tack. I did use a tiny bit of filler rod, but that's just really to make sure it doesn't come off, or at least hope it doesn't come off. Hopefully what you can see I've done now is I've obviously tacked this into place. I've then used the mounting bolts to set them level. I've taken the size of the mount and made sure that we've got that. Yeah, we did have that, plus a little bit of clearance. I'll do an alteration on that in a second. On the other side, I think we're okay. Yeah, we're okay on the other side. We've just come out a bit on this side, so I'll do that. Yeah, sorry, we've come out a bit on this side, so I'll just do that. It's a bit tight. In fact, I can do it while here. I do that, and then hopefully we should end up with, there we go. So we've got a little bit of movement. I don't want it super tight because it's going to come in anyway. So now I believe I can probably tack that in on the front edge here, just to get that tacked in place. I did have to cut out that little section there, which I was hoping to keep that radius, but I've kept the radius and I think I might put those back in afterwards. So the idea of this mount going back, obviously we had the mounts before, they were a bit crude. So the idea of this mount is to be able to lose this middle section. I don't like this middle section going underneath the engine because there are two outlets there, which you can now see on the engine. So there are two outlets, both slap bang where those things are. Now, I have no idea what they are. They would have been on the top of the engine originally. They're now on the bottom. They're going to need sealing up at the best. Worst, there might be oil inlets or outlets or whatever, so we're going to have to deal with that as and when. So that's the reason why I didn't want the engine mounted as it was. Purely, simply in that. It may be that I don't need them any way, shape or form, but I think I probably will. So there we go. We have moved the engine a little bit on its original mountings. I did mark them up. That's the original mount line there. So we've come forward probably 3 or 4 inches, which gives us a little bit more clearance at the back for all the stuff that's got to go at the back, get the gearbox in roughly the right place. Still gives us room for a grille at the front if we choose to go with the Rolls Royce grille. Spot on. So that's tacked in now. I'm going to run it through with a little bit of filler rod as well. But I just wanted to get it tacked in the first place. So another little movement forwards. This has taken a long time, and my lack of engineering knowledge and experience, and also just general over-engineering, is not helping, but I'm getting somewhere. So if you remember, we started with 2 plates that mounted to the engine and sort of originally were designed to just drop into a Bentley chassis as it happens. This is a Rolls Royce chassis. The way it fitted on the chassis originally with the Rolls Royce I didn't particularly like. I wanted it to go forwards a little bit, and if you remember, we had the mount for the leaf springs pretty much in the way, and also the mounts for the strengtheners underneath, that sort of triangulated strengthening underneath. So the idea was to get rid of those and bypass those. So on the front I have a really complicated mount. So I think you probably saw me making some of the bits. So halfway through we got to this, which basically has these mounts in exact parallel, exact height to where we want it to be, and the sort of right angle that fits inside the chassis rails. The chassis rails, you can see, sort of come to here just because that's where it's got burnt with peat and whatever. So yeah, it's, it's a bit rough and ready. And then as we've gone through, you'll have to excuse some of the welding on this. I'm really new with TIG, so I've just gone massively overheat. I haven't managed to clean it up quite as well as it needed to be, and so on. So cut me a bit of slack on that one, but it ain't going nowhere because it's gusseted on the inside and all sorts. So we now have the same angle on here, the same following of the curvature of the chassis, mountings on the bottom and on the top. There's 5 mountings in place, as well as it being fairly well gusseted, as you can see. Again, excuse the welding, some of it is a little bit questionable. I just cannot see that going anywhere, so I'm more than happy with that. I've tried to add a bit of detail here. I will bodywork these, so they really are, when they're finished, they will be they'll be immaculate. Now all I've got to do is replicate that one onto that one, and then we have the front mounts, and they will bolt in place. And once they're bolted in place, I can then basically drop the engine back in and work out the height for the pinion angle. So forward wind quite a length of time, to be fair, and I have my brackets. I'm relatively pleased with them. I'm not going to say they're perfect because they're not, but they are, they're welded together, they're not going anywhere. I've made a decision that I'd like to try and get the engine back in, so I'm going to mount the front brackets. I've given the insides just a quick cursory clean back. I'm going back to the beginning a bit here, but one of the reasons why we ended up with this really elaborate sort of engine mount design is because of these. This is the brace that runs all the way down the car and is triangulated a bit like a suspension bridge, I suppose. And on top of that, the mounts for the front springs is the word I'm looking for desperately. So I didn't want to interfere in any of that, but I wanted to make it so that the mount was pretty much above these, and there was no way I could do it by just in my thought of engineering, there's no way I could do it without spreading the load, because I've got to go across the top here. So that is why I've gone to such an elaborate design on the front. The back will be nothing like this because there is nothing there. It's sort of going to end up in here somewhere, I think. So there's nothing there. So that in itself is really quite good, apart from mounting holes, of course. So as you will see, the engine mounts are in. They're not totally finished, as I said before, but they're in enough to be able to mount the engine. So I've put the engine back on its lift, and I can now get the engine lifted in. Looking slightly forwards, what I want to do is get the engine in. I want to get the pinion angle set. I'm advised about 1-2 degrees in terms of a pinion angle. Once the engine's back in and I've got a pinion angle, I'm going to take the sump off, and then I'm going to show some pictures to the guy in America, Dan DeChant, who is the authority on these things. If you get the opportunity, or if you view on YouTube any of the Fairchild Ranger engines that have been mounted in cars or built for cars or tractor racing or whatever, Dan's the man behind them. He has sent me some pictures of his sump, and it is vastly different to mine. I think mine will have to have a dry sump off it. I think that's probably what one of the connections is on either side. So, and that's fine. I can do that. I just need to know it will work. As I said, this is a learning curve for me from the very beginning to the very end. Bit of backwards and forwards going on there, but basically, yeah, it's on its mounts. It's level at the front, left to right, which is good. So I'm pleased with how that's gone in. Obviously, I had to get the measurements pretty much bang on, which is quite pleasing. So yeah, measures in that side, into the side. So it's looking much better. I think the engine will pretty much sit on those two mounts. I don't even know whether I need the back mounts in terms of physically holding it there, but I'm obviously going to put it in. I want to get it level left to right, obviously, so that when you look down the bonnet, it's there. Probably it's going to have a bonnet on the top of it, but you know, let's have it so it looks straight. You'll notice I had to take the starter off. I think, yeah, you saw that earlier on in the video. I will put the starter back on. There looks to be a bit of a planetary gear in there for the starter, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I don't want that falling out, obviously. Yeah, I think we'll call that progress. So according to my man Dan, 2 degrees of Custer is what we're looking for, and as you can see, we have 2 degrees. It's level on the top of the chassis, so we have 2 degrees. I've put the old back mounts on. I'm going to use these as the guides, and basically the mounts are going to have to be measured and stuff, but we haven't got anything in the way like we did on the other side. Obviously we want the gearbox, or we want the engine centralised, and then we can run the gearbox off and have the gearbox coming with the lever outside here. Hopefully it's all beginning to make sense. I'm not sure it is to me, but hopefully it is to you. So there we have it, another episode on the Rolls Royce Aero Special, and the Aero is now in the Rolls Royce, which is really cool. If you've enjoyed, please like, subscribe, spread the word, and we'll see what we're doing next week. Hopefully see you then. Cheers, thanks for watching.